Jewish Channel's Week in Review. How Israel is and isn't part of talk around the situation in Syria, an Israeli-Palestinian love affair on film, a kosher French restaurant joins the stereotype of urban family living, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. As much of the world is considering the situation in Syria and what to do about it, Jewish groups and groups concerned with Israel are measuring their words. As the JTA notes, 3 major Jewish organizations released statements supporting an American strike on military installations of Syria's President Bashar Assad, while avoiding mentioning the word Israel. The statements from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations suggest that allowing the use of so-called weapons of mass destruction to go unchecked could have implications well beyond Syria, such as in Iran, where a nuclear weapons program is presumed to be advancing. While much is made of the obvious points for comparison between the call for military intervention in Syria today and that regarding Iraq a decade ago, this position of Jewish organizational leadership offers an interesting contrast. Jewish organizations were largely silent on the issue of Iraq in 2002 and 2003, while former President George W. Bush sought authorization for an invasion of Iraq. Indeed, Jewish organizations at the time were saying that they'd prefer a focus on Iran, not Iraq. And today, of course, the larger issue of Israel's safety is again being considered in light of Iran, perhaps more so than in regards to Syria directly. Another aspect of Jewish and Jewish-related rhetoric in regard to the civil war in Syria is in invocations of the Holocaust. These arguments first cropped up when Hardball host Chris Matthews and Israel commentator John Mearsheimer claimed on TV broadcasts that Adolf Hitler had not used chemical weapons.
For decades, don't use chemical weapons. We didn't use them in World War II. Hitler didn't use them.
Of course, Hitler and the Nazi regime did use chemical weapons, specifically to gas many of the millions of civilians slaughtered in their genocidal efforts. Now, the invocation of the Holocaust is in part coming from those calling for intervention. Chair of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, told CNN, "As a Jew, the concept of never again has to mean something." Meantime, on the topic of chemical weapons arsenals in the Middle East, the possibility that Israel has chemical weapons was revealed in a foreignpolicy.com article on Monday. The article revealed the existence of a 1983 CIA intelligence estimate that said American spy satellites had found in 1982, quote, a probably chemical weapon nerve agent production facility and a storage facility at the Dimona Sensitive Storage Area in the Negev Desert. Other CW or chemical weapon production is believed to exist within a well-developed Israeli chemical industry. The intelligence estimate went on to declare, while we cannot confirm whether the Israelis possess lethal chemical agents, several indicators lead us to believe they have available to them at least persistent and non-persistent nerve agents, a mustard agent, and several riot control agents marched with suitable delivery systems. Fascinatingly, this piece of classified information seems to have been released by accident, as it was found by a researcher in the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, according to the article's author, quote, stapled to an innocuous unclassified report. Moving on, while Israeli-Palestinian peace talks seem to be taking a back seat to the discussion of Syria, fictional Israeli-Palestinian love affairs are never out of season. Christian Needham reports on a new movie that tackles just such a topic.
Love and politics are rarely good bedfellows, and they are certainly at odds in the Israeli film Out in the Dark. Director Michael Myers' 2012 Israeli drama, which had its New York premiere this week at JCC Manhattan as part of NewFest, the New York City LGBT Film Festival. The film follows the relationship between 2 men, Niemer and Roy, who find love despite the political hurdles of the Israeli-Palestinian divide.
Out in the Dark is a story of a Palestinian student who dreams of a better life, of studying abroad, and he meets and falls in love with an Israeli lawyer. They start dating, and then basically the realities of the conflict of the Middle East start closing in on them, and he's forced to make a choice between the life he thought he wanted and his love for Roy.
Roy is played by Michael Aloni, who Israeli audiences know from his time on the science fiction television series Hashmaniya, or The Octet.
Roy is a lawyer, is very successful one. Everything goes for him in life like pretty smooth and easy. He's really open-minded, really innocent, and at the beginning of the film he just falls in love. I think Roy's sides in the film shows like the gay, open kind of attitude that we have in Tel Aviv. I think the Palestinian side may be suffering a little bit more, as you can see in the movie.
That suffering, Myers said, was a major inspiration for the film's screenplay, which he began working on 10 years ago, and the resulting film will finally have its American theatrical release on September 27th.
It came about because a friend of mine was volunteering with the Gan Lesbian Center in Tel Aviv, and he was basically doing some of what the movie talks about, which is help gay Palestinians who are hiding illegally in Israel. And I just thought, both me and my co-writer, we thought it was just an amazing story, and we at first really just wanted to research the story and just learn more for ourselves, for our own good. And we did that for about 4 months, and we realized it'll make a great movie.
To see more from the director and star of Out in the Dark, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Perhaps seen as outside the world of love affairs, the neighborhood of Park Slope, Brooklyn has become synonymous with upper-class child rearing. And when kosher-observing parents there need a break, they can now head to the first kosher restaurant in the area in some time, as Meredith Gansman reports.
The high holidays are all about starting fresh and trying new things. And the new taste in Park Slope, Brooklyn is kosher French bistro cuisine. Native Parisians Dan and Sonia Halimi, he's a former real estate professional, and she's a former journalist, moved to Park Slope a little over a year ago with the dream to own their own restaurant.
Yeah, the idea was really, can we go beyond the neighborhood? Can we bring people here? It's such a beautiful neighborhood.
Though Park Slope has a significant Jewish community, the Chagall Bistro is the first kosher restaurant in the neighborhood in over 15 years. Elon Kornblum is the publisher of Great Kosher Restaurants magazine.
Divine intervention, you might call it, that they're now kosher in Park Slope. But the fact that they are kosher now allows people from Borough Park, which is very close, Crown Heights. When I was there were a lot of Crown Heights people.
From the prints of French-Jewish artist Marc Chagall's paintings hung on high, vintage cabaret chairs, and brushed floor-length mirrors, all imported from France, to the roasted duck and risotto, the bistro has an authentic feel. In preparation for the high holidays, the restaurant chef showed how to add a French flair to your holiday dinners. Try a roasted duck stuffed with pomegranates and a variety of herbs including rosemary, thyme, and bay leaves.
We season the duck with a little bit of oil and into the oven.
Plate the duck with seasonal vegetables and top it with a pomegranate reduction duck gravy and pomegranate seeds. For more kosher French cuisine from Chagall Bistro, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, the way we choose to live is often defined in large part by the kinds of homes we choose. But what about the other choices we're making with a home, the neighborhood and the city? Fortune magazine associate managing editor Lee Gallagher suggests we as Americans are making very different choices than we have in the past in her new book, The End of the Suburbs. She recently stopped by for an interview, and here are the highlights. So your book details something that affects everyone's life in America, but very few people spend a lot of time thinking about it, which is the kind of structures of the cities and towns in which we'll choose to live.
It's absolutely true. You take for granted a lot about your environment, I think. But when you really learn, as I did for this book, I did a ton of research about how and why we live the way we live. It's not always up to us. A lot of it is the way our country has been arranged for us. And, you know, as I say in the book, it was arranged one way a very long time ago, right after World War II, that was the birthing of our modern suburbs, the ones that have looping streets and cul-de-sacs, the ones that most people who live in the suburbs live in this way. And you know, my thesis in the book is that basically that model just sort of expanded too much. It grew bigger and kind of supersized, and the subdivisions grew more and more sort of Stepfordy, so that they really stopped delivering on the promises that the suburbs were planned to deliver in the first place.
Most people who don't live in cities likely don't want to live in cities, but then when you list some of the problems with the kinds of suburbs that are diminishing, that those problems, I think, are ones that people more easily understand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's things like having really long commutes, because we sort of built the model further and further out. So you have suburbs that are really 70 miles from the urb they're supposed to be sub of. So that means people are in their cars for hours on end. We have more than 3.5 million people now do commutes of 90 minutes each way. And so what that means is that, you know, a big reason to move to the suburbs is that, oh, I'm going to prioritize the family, give my, you know, children a yard and space, and that's wonderful. But if mom and dad are trapped in their car for 3 hours a day, they're actually not there enough, and that is actually, you know, in a way that's deprioritizing the family.
And a lot of what is talked about throughout this discussion of housing is ultimately how you get where you're going, and there seems to be a great sizable portion of people in the country who want to walk more.
Exactly. It's you know, walkability is the new buzzword for sure. That's what everyone wants. And whether that's in a downtown Manhattan or whether that's in a suburb where you can actually either walk to a small town, a village sort of center, or if you can, you know, drive there, park, and get out and have a pleasing place to walk and do your errands instead of driving to the strip mall here, the car place here, the grocery store here, and your job over here. You know, people want to be near somewhere where they can, you know, take a pleasant stroll, get a cup of coffee, and be on foot more. It's better for people's levels of happiness, studies show. It's better for their health, for sure. I have a great stat in the book that says that New Yorkers on average weigh about 6 to 7 pounds less than the average suburban American, precisely because we walk so much in New York.
Yeah.
But I took a book leave and I lived somewhere for 2 months where I had to drive a car. I write this in the book. And I gained 6 pounds. And so there's the, you know, stat borne out.
6 pounds, yeah. Something that also kind of pops up throughout the book, even if it's not explicitly discussed, is this concept of filtering. The idea that, that one area becomes old people, old construction, old models, and over time there's just less demand to live there. It becomes cheaper, and then eventually it becomes so cheap that in come the artists, in come the young creatives, and they transform the place, and then it becomes very desirable.
And that's very much a market-based solution. I mean, the market tends to even things out. People go where there's demand, and then things change, and then demand might shift to somewhere else, as you mentioned, as the price gets low enough. So that's a lot of it. I think another part of it is people like to be surrounded with people like them. So that's why when you talk about, you know, the suburbs are aging, and that presents an issue of, okay, well, what happens with schools? So as the population in some suburbs ages, those taxpayers are going to have a different priority. They're going to want to make sure that the street signals are readable and other things, and they're not going to care so much about schools. But of course, you know, families with young children want those schools to be good. So you're going to find the communities with really good schools are going to draw more children and more families, and then, you know, it'll be sort of like a patchwork where, you know, the ones without the strong schools will see those families leave.
You can see the full interview with Lee Gallagher in the interviews category under TJC Original Series on the Jewish Channel On Demand on cable. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.